So before we begin the study, I want to read to you 2 Corinthians chapter 11, starting in verse 3. It says, "But I fear lest by any means as the serpent beguiled Eve through his subtlety, so your mind should be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Christ. For if he that cometh preacheth another Jesus, so there is another Jesus, whom we have not preached, or if ye receive another spirit, so there's another spirit, which ye have not received, or another gospel, so there's another gospel, which ye have not accepted, you might well bear with me." They translated it him, but in like the Complete Biblical Library and some other resources, it says me. I know for Complete Biblical Library for sure, but Paul is saying to bear with me. So he goes on to say later on down here, he says, in verses 13 through 15, it says, "For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into the apostles of Christ." So they transform. They want to look like Christ. And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. So Satan is transformed and looks like he has a good message. Therefore, it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works. So as we saw yesterday, that there's servants. There was missionaries for Serapis, and Serapis was the serpent god right next to Asclepius. Here we see that Satan tries to look like Christ, and we're going to see that as we study. So we're going to go into the New Strong's Complete Dictionary of Biblical Words, and we're going to go ahead and open right up to where it says devil. So there's some different words that have been translated devil. You have deonizomai, to be demonized; daimonion, demonic being; daimon, evil supernatural spirit; and diabolos, traducer, that is Satan; devilish, daemoniodes, demon-like, of the devil; devils, shed, demon; and satyr, like a satyr or satyr; shaggy, he-goat, goat idol. Some people have heard of a satyr before. I'm sure that's where we get that word. So, and some of these, sometimes you got to be careful with how they define it, but we're going to learn as we go. So right here we have Leviathan, which is a serpent, as in a crocodile. So we see in Job, they describe Leviathan, and we'll get more into that later as well. Right here we have Lucifer, which is Hallel, Venus, the morning star. And Christ calls himself the morning star. So Lucifer tries to look like Christ, as we said. And Jesus said, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, in John chapter 3. We have Nehushtan, which means a copper serpent. We have Satan, which is opponent; Satanas, accuser, that is the devil. We have Satan's, Satanas, accuser, that is the devil. All right, serpent, we have Nakash, snake, but it actually means from its whisper, and it means to prognosticate. We'll get into a lot more on that in the Two Babylons by Alexander Hislop about what the serpent means. So we have seraph, like when God says to Moses, make a fiery serpent. Serpent isn't actually in there in Numbers. It actually just says make thee a fiery. And then it says that Moses made the copper serpent, which is Nehushtan, which in 2 Kings chapter 18, Hezekiah destroys because people had started worshiping it. So God says to make a seraph, and he makes the copper serpent, like he said. We'll look more into that. So Tanin, sea serpent; jackal, 3789, Ophis, which is a snake; and then serpents, Nakash, we've already said that one up here; serpents, Zakal, to crawl; and then, like I said, Nakash is up there; Tanin, we've already said that one up there; Herpeton, reptile; and Ophis, snake, we've already said that one, which is right there. Okay. So that right there is just a little brief introduction in this, because it shows you all the various words that have been translated. And in the back, it also has the Strong's Hebrew and Greek dictionary. All right. So we'll go ahead and start reading from Alexander Hislop, The Two Babylons. And this is going to be quite extensive, so bear with me. It's going to be quite a read. We're going to read about the red dragon. Okay, so we saw that dragon is Dracon. So did I actually, you know what, I'm not sure if I showed y'all that one. One moment, and I'll pull that up for y'all real quick. So I'm not sure if I actually went by that one because I forgot to mark it. Sorry about that. Let me see. So we have Dracon, dragon, Tanin, like we saw before, sea serpent, and Dracon, a fabulous kind of serpent. So the red dragon from Revelations, that's actually means a fiery, fiery fascinator. Red is Puros, and Dracon is comes from the word meaning to fascinate. So right here in The Two Babylons by Alexander Hislop, it says in this is chapter 7, the two developments historically and prophetically considered. Hitherto we have considered the history of the two Babylons chiefly in detail. Now we are to view them as organized systems. The idolatrous system of the ancient Babylon assumed different phases in different periods of its history. In the prophetic description of the modern Babylon, there is evidently also a development of different powers at different times. Do these two developments bear any typical relation to each other? Yes, they do. When we bring the religious history of the ancient Babylonian paganism to bear on the prophetic symbols that shadow forth the organized working of idolatry in Rome, it will be found that it casts as much light on this view of the subject as on that which has hitherto engaged our attention. The powers of iniquity at work in the modern Babylon are specifically described in chapters 12 and 13 of Revelation, and they are as follows. 1. The great red dragon. 2. The beast that comes up out of the sea. 3. The beast that ascended out of the earth. And 4. The image of the beast. In all these respects, it will be found on inquiry that in regards to succession and order of development, the paganism of the Old Testament Babylon was the exact type of the paganism of the New. So we have what happened in the Garden of Eden, and then after the flood in Babylon, they resurrected that same system, and it went down through Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, and then the old fire worship of Rome was outlawed, and then they introduced the water baptism, which isn't the same as the Holy Ghost baptism, and that's what's come down to us today in all of these Protestant Reformation, which is just Roman Catholicism under a new name. So, chapter 7, section 1, the Great Red Dragon. This formidable enemy of the truth is particularly described in Revelations 12:3. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, a great red dragon. It is admitted on all hands that this is the first grand enemy that in gospel times assaulted the Christian church. If the term in which it is described and the deeds attributed to it are considered, it will be found that there is a great analogy between it and the first enemy of all that appeared against the ancient church of God soon after the flood. The term dragon, or Dracon, according to the associations currently connected with it, is somewhat apt to mislead the reader by recalling to his mind the fabulous dragons of the Dark Ages equipped with wings. At the time this divine description was given, the term dragon had no such meaning among either profane or sacred writers. The dragon of the Greeks, it says Pausanias, was only a large snake, and the context shows that this is the very case here. For what in the third verse is called a dragon, in the 14th is simply described as a serpent, but we see it as fascinate. So if you look it up, they'll say or enchant, and something that's fascinating is going to distract your attention from God, kind of like the lights and shows and bands and this thing called church that has no biblical roots with the clergy, laity, pulpit, pew system. All of that stuff has no biblical roots, yet everybody does it. Then the word rendered red properly means fiery, so that the red dragon signifies the fiery serpent, or serpent of fire. Exactly so does it appear to have been in the first form of idolatry that, under the patronage of Nimrod, appeared in the ancient world. The serpent of fire in the plains of Shinar seems to have been the grand object of worship. There is the strongest evidence that apostasy among the sons of Noah began in fire worship, and that in connection with the symbol of the serpent. We have seen already on different occasions that fire was worshipped as the enlightener and the purifier. Now it was thus at the very beginning, for Nimrod is singled out by the voice of antiquity as commencing this fire worship. The identity of Nimrod and Ninus has already been proved, and under the name Ninus, also he is represented as originating the same practice. In a fragment of Apollodorus, it is said that Ninus taught the Syrians to worship fire. The sun, as the great source of light and heat, was worshipped under the name of Baal. Now, Baal means Lord. Now, the fact that the sun, under that name, was worshipped in the earliest ages of the world shows the audacious character of these first beginnings of apostasy. Men have spoken as if the worship of the sun and of the heavenly bodies was a very excusable thing, into which the human race might very readily and very innocently fall. But how stands the fact? According to the primitive language of mankind, the sun was called Shemesh, that is, the servant. That name, no doubt, being divinely given to keep the world in mind of the great truth that, however glorious was the orb of day, it was, after all, the appointed minister of the bounty of the great unseen Creator to his creatures upon earth. Men knew this, and yet with the full knowledge of it, they put the servant in the place of the master, and called the sun Baal, that is, the Lord, and worshipped him greatly. So they called it Baal, the Lord, instead of Shemesh, the servant. What a meaning, then, in the saying of Paul that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, but changed the truth of God into a lie, and worshipped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is God over all, blessed forever. The beginning, then, of sun worship and of the worship of the host of heaven was a sin against the light, a presumptuous, heaven-daring sin. As the sun in the heaven was the great object of worship, so fire was worshipped as its earthly representative. To this primeval fire worship, Vitruvius alludes when he says that men were first formed into states and communities by meeting around fires. And this is exactly in conformity with what we have already seen in regards to Pharonius, whom we have identified with Nimrod, that while he was said to be the inventor of fire, he was also regarded as the first that gathered mankind into communities. Okay, I'll see you in the next film.